By 1978, George Romero had begun to really carve out a name for himself in the film world. While Night of the Living Dead had initially been released to some mixed reviews, largely due to its, for the time, gory content and themes, within 5 years it had gone on to become one of the most successful horror films of its time. And with further moderate successes in films such as The Crazies and the cult classic Martin, it was only really a matter of time before Romero was to revisit the themes that initially launched his career. What would follow would go on to be considered by many to be his magnum opus, a film that would not only redefine and further cement the zombie genre into the mainstream, but a film that would go on to shape and define horror itself for the next 4 decades. And that film? 1978's Dawn of the Dead. I genuinely struggle to find the words to explain quite how I feel about this film. In fact, at the time of its release, I really can't think of anything quite like it. A wonderful mix of splatter-filled cartoony gore, striking horror, and firmly tongue-in-cheek dark comedy. The plot is almost as basic as the original plot for Night of the Living Dead. It's set very shortly after the news of a zombie uprising has broken out, somewhere just after 12 hours in, and features Fran and Stephen, 2 news journalists who are held up in a television station monitoring the situation. When things seem to be looking grim, they plan their escape in a helicopter, but not before picking up a couple of members of a nearby SWAT unit, who've also set their sights on getting away from the big city. The escape is a success, but they quickly realise they hadn't thought much about where they wanted to go beyond their initial escape. And after a couple of stop-offs, they eventually stumble on an abandoned mall and decide initially to stock up on supplies. But after a while of wandering around the stores, they begin to feel both at home and quite safe. So they make the decision to hold up in the mall and have some fun with all the free stuff they can pinch. It sounds quite basic, but the difference is whereas Night sets the scene in a small space and then pretty much lets it run its course as tensions rise, Dawn really pushes the envelope in asking what would somebody do if they were given almost absolute control over a sprawling environment and anything they could possibly need or want to do is free to them, at least from a commercial standpoint. The script here is almost perfect, with a tightrope line between the macabre and the light-hearted. This is far from a family film, but mixing in those darker elements with almost slapstick comedy definitely helped to set the precise style this film needed to not be too overbearing or too bleak. Peter, Roger, Francine and Stephen all have absolutely brilliant, fluid and believable dialogue, and the characters themselves are all quite well-rounded, well-developed and given enough space to really let them flourish into utterly memorable characters. It's also nice to finally see a reasonably strong female heroine in this film in the form of Fran, who's quite the contrast to Barbara, constantly wanting to be involved, constantly wanting to have meaningful input, and genuinely saving the group on multiple occasions. They don't go so far as to make her an infallible superheroine, but the balance is just right between giving her a decent feminine human element and a firm stand-your-ground personality. She's amazing. The zombies in this production feel much more closer to their modern counterparts, and while they still aren't 100% there in terms of consistency, the green, blue-faced slow walkers are a little bit off yet in terms of looking realistic, they do what they do fairly well. These types slowly peter out throughout the film to just unmade-up actors in tattered clothes. They do, however, have the slow, groaning, lurching, organ-devouring qualities down to an absolute T. They even do a bit more delving into the zombies' learning curves, with implications of muscle memory beckoning them to return to the mall, through to them learning the use of basic tools to smash windows. It takes its original idea and builds on it, and is a very clever use of the monsters. This is one of the few films that I've seen where pretty much every performance, even the extras, are pretty much spot on, with our core main actors being absolutely superb and not a bad performance between them as they play out the zombie survival completely straight. But contrasting their performances, the extras, particularly members of the SWAT team and the biker gangs, have a tremendously over-the-top exaggerated performance that just adds a completely new flavour to the mix and gives it a really slightly campy twist. It really adds to the production and helps create this bleak yet fun environment that I can't say I've ever seen properly handled in a horror film since. The direction is gorgeous, with an absolute attention to detail that's simply amazing for its time, and some lovely little subtle moments. For example, when the helicopter initially takes off at the beginning of the film, the tower block behind it slowly goes completely dark. They also really play around with the zombies, using close-ups of them massing on windows to help really drive home a sense of claustrophobia, and mirroring those with vast wide shots that help to play with the themes of isolation that the main cast are suffering throughout. These zombies are not particularly bright, which again only adds to this film's dark comedy elements, and it really helps to amp up that good direction. Matching it beat for beat is some absolutely wonderful cinematography that was equally beautiful for the time, with fantastic match edits stitching together the end of one scene into the start of another, perfectly smooth pans and pull focuses that help to build tension and allow for an incredible atmosphere. They also really use their shot types well, with a decent range of variation that helps to sell the gorier moments excellently. This is made all the better when the blood in this film's finally shown, because it's some of the most hyper-colourful, redder-than-red blood that I've seen since the early Hammer films, and it really adds to creating the right vibe that this film is looking for. Another element that was carried over amazingly well from the original film was the lighting. In the original Night of the Living Dead, the lighting was one of the best elements of the film. Dawn of the Dead, being shot in colour, made me concerned that they may abandon this atmospheric element. Though it turns out I was quite wrong. The scenes in the staff parts of the mall are almost as good, if not better in some cases, than the lighting in the original Night of the Living Dead, with ultra-dark, grainy mood lighting that really amps up that atmosphere and feeling of uncertainty. Contrasting these, the shots in the mall itself are all incredibly well lit and give a very sugar-coated clinical vibe that really helps create a sense of unease in and of itself. I will find a flaw with this film eventually, surely. The special effects aren't one of them though, as Tom Savini gives the audience an absolute masterclass in practical effects, with limbs being lopped off, heads being decapitated and struck with various weapons, and scenes of zombies eating living people that must have been stomach-churning for the time. Savini even has a cameo in this film as one of the bikers, and he's worth the price of admission alone. There have been multiple themes interpreted from this film over the years. Consumerism and the rise of corporate America have been fairly well documented by film historians, with the zombies effectively being a metaphor for us as consumers. These aren't the only elements of the film. Gender roles are brought to the surface and then nicely subverted throughout. There's a very nice subtext involving logic versus reason running as an undertone throughout the film, with an argument being made that the zombies were people's relatives and a counter-argument being made with the emphasis on the were part. While this particular theme is never really put front and centre in this film, it does bubble away in the background and ultimately does affect how our main cast behave throughout, as they have several difficult choices to make. It's a theme that would probably be more fully explored in Romero's next zombie venture, however. I also noticed some comments on parenthood and some very challenging themes on the breakdown of societal constructs and its effect on the human psyche, particularly towards the end of the film, as our group realise that this isn't going to be something that'll happen for a few days and then life will go back to normal. This is for the long haul. Lots of people will die, and they will probably die. And when that sinks in, this film enters a wonderful period of melancholy. Now, there's something I haven't spoken about. You see, there isn't technically an official definitive cut of this film, and the reason that's the case is simply down to money. Financing, to be precise. The film had a tremendously difficult time securing the funds to get off the ground initially, with no one wanting to take the risk that came with investing the amount needed. Enter the fold Italian producer-director and absolute god of European filmmaking, Dario Argento. Argento, riding on a wave of mixed to positive reviews for his 1977 masterpiece Suspiria, was a massive Romero fan, and having heard that he was having trouble in procuring funding to work on a sequel for Night of the Living Dead, Argento met with Romero, and over a few conversations and a brief excursion to Rome, he was able to procure him all the money needed to finance the film at one significant caveat. Argento wanted the distribution rights for European territories. This would involve not only having the ability to distribute the film to all non-English speaking European territories, but also the final say on the edit that would go out to those European territories. This means that for a very long time there were two completely tonally different cuts of this film existing in different countries. Romero's cut is much more visually colourful, relies on stock music for the most part, runs for roughly 127 minutes, and has significantly more emphasis on the comedic elements of the film. The Argento cut, by contrast, has a much harsher, colder colour palette and tones down the comedy elements to an almost non-existent level. It's also a full 10 minutes shorter than Romero's cut, but has a full soundtrack by the legendary prog rock band Goblin. It was also rather bizarrely given a rename, being called Zombi on its release in Europe, a small change that would have big consequences down the line. But we'll get to that another day. The two cuts existed separately for years until the 1990s, when a so-called director's cut was released, which was overseen by Romero and added less than a minute's worth of additional footage. This was followed in the early 2000s by a so-called final cut, a 156-minute cut that attempted to create a hybrid between the various cuts of the film. Even so, fans are heavily divided on which version is the true version of this film. Myself, well, I grew up in an age where both were readily available, and as of recording, neither have been available in my country for a very long time, due mainly to long-standing rights issues and how much the owners want for them. As a result, all UK versions of Dawn of the Dead are now very much out of print, and are likely to be out of print for much of the foreseeable. In summary, this film is the Rosetta Stone of zombie movies. It's got it all: horror, suspense, action, drama, comedy, all working together to create a genuine piece of art. It has wonderful direction, ultra-creative cinematography and editing, fantastic lighting, great acting, near-perfect sound design. It's got a tight script that's biggest crime is being too eager to try things. A massive leap up from Night. You absolutely must see this film. Romero earned the box office $55 million with this, so it was only natural that people would be curious about what came next for the franchise. And what did come next was possibly one of the bleakest films I have ever seen.